Okay, we are on the lunch break of the questioning of Monica, a Reclaim the Streets environmental activist who is deceived into a long-term intimate relationship by the undercover officer Jim Boyling. It's been quite emotional. I'm joined by Jay Jordan, who was one of the Reclaim the Streets activists at the same time. You were mentioned quite a few times during her questioning. Yeah, it has been very emotional. There's been a lot about the deceptive, abusive relationship that she had with Jim Boyling, as well as her activism with Reclaim the Streets. We've seen a lot of reports about the RTS street parties that took place. There was one particular one which looked at the March for Social Justice, where Monica got quite emotional about seeing the plan that was meant to be, that she never knew at the time, and how that was disrupted. What did you make of her evidence?
Well, I mean, that was quite a shocking moment where she was shown the plan. She was shown this document, which actually she hadn't seen before, and it hadn't been disclosed to her, which I think is not on at all. I think what didn't come out is, clearly, this is the whole political policing thing, that clearly this was a huge moment for the movements, because it was where the Liverpool Dockers, all the social justice movements were getting together with the Direct Action ecological activists. So it was a really key kind of moment of composition. And I think that was one of the reasons why they really wanted to sabotage it. The plan was to go to the Department of Environment was moving. So I think there was like several huge, it was this thing in Marchmont Street, they had huge buildings, and I think 2 of them were empty and one of them wasn't, but anyway, it was being emptied, and the plan was to squat the empty Department of Environment and say, this is the real Department of Environment. We'd squat it, we'd break off the march, we'd squat it, and then we'd hold a weekend of talks and conferences and parties and culture and so on. And the plan was, we made these beautiful flags that were like 4,000 flags, which were really beautiful, which showed the kind of composition. So the idea was the flags had 3 colors, but you could have 3 versions of the different flags. So it had a lightning strike through it. So if you were predominantly an anarchist, you'd have a black flag, and you'd have a red and a green lightning strike through it, which would be predominantly anarchist, but with a bit of communism and a bit of ecology. But if you're predominantly ecologist, you'd have the green flag with a little black bit of anarchism and communism. It was beautiful. It was a really beautiful idea. And so there was these 4,000 flags, and the idea was these flags would go out, and then suddenly we'd break out of the march, and go to the Department of Environment and have a street party outside it while people were squatting it. There was also the plan to do the night before. We had spent days and days making an Invading Standards, which was a fake evening standard. So I was arrested just the night before with 2 other people. So I spent the whole day in the police cells. So I missed the whole March for Social Justice, although I do remember seeing a riot cop coming in covered in white paint, which anyway. So I think really the reason, and it was the first time really Reclaim the Streets had got mega negative press, and the headline the next day was attempted murder, because there was this whole story of the sound system. And interesting, Jim's saying, I don't know if we're going to get sound system out. The whole story of the sound system pushing through a police line to get out. So the whole thing was constructed so that, and they're saying it in their own statements. They're saying, if Reclaim Streets isn't allowed to do their thing, it will kick off. So in the documents that I think are disclosed, you see a whole debate saying, should we let them do it or not?
Yeah, I mean, we did see that actually. We were shown today. There was a really strange sort of bit of police logic where they say it was about the Brighton RTS, where it was rather than there being a static street party, the police forced them to move on, and then it moved around town. There were 80 arrests. There were a lot of flashpoints, and the source comment, which was Jim Boyling's comment, was that it would be much safer and easier to contain a static street party than a moving one. And that because this police logic that somehow by allowing the street party to happen, you pull the teeth out of the politics of the event because there's no confrontation, which kind of, I mean, I just belies the sort of the police understanding of these things. That, well, if we're not involved, then it's clearly not political.
Well, yeah, but also they wanted the headlines, you know. I mean, they wanted the confrontation. They wanted to take the teeth out of the movement. You know, they wanted people to be scared of coming to Reclaim the Streets things because it kicked off. And I think there's a really interesting debate report in one of in some of the documents that were disclosed around the March for Social Justice, which is saying where there's a whole debate whether SDS should tell the Metropolitan Police that they know where it's happening, and this is going to come up later with J18 as well, that how SDS refused to give certain information out for their own like political agenda, yeah, I need to look at those. I need to look at those things. But there's super interesting debate in this one of the documents where they're like, you know, should we let it happen? Should we not let it happen? Should we let it happen? And it's a whole debate with the Metropolitan Police. And I think it's in that document that they say, you know, the uniform will be happy to be off the leash. Is one of the phrases.
Yeah, as we know full well, they often are at protests. A lot of the questioning of Monica over the last couple of hours has related to the fact that in the reports, Jim Boyling is talking about the organizational plans for protests, and it's been put to her, well, was this what was meant to happen? Was what was meant to happen? And she's quite clear, look, I was just attending these protests. I didn't involve myself in the organizational side of things very often. There were occasions where she was an organizer, but a lot of the time she wasn't. And so I simply don't know. I mean, this is what he says. You have to ask other people, and that this is a lot of the sort of the approach of the inquiry, where it sort of assumes the knowledge of whoever the witness is of the inner workings of what the undercover officer is actually doing. And what did you make of that?
I mean, you know, what you see with Jim is that he, you know, he's got such, I mean, they all had these fucking huge egos. I mean, I think that's what, you know, they all, you know, they just felt, you know, and we now know that, you know, Jim thought he was God at times. And so you had this sense of Jim pushing up this idea that he was this key organizer in the thing. And, you know, he was mates with all the key organizers, and he did do key organizing things. But as Monica so beautifully put it, you know, at one point she goes, you know, well, how can you call him an organizer? Because he actually disorganized the thing. So he made sure the thing didn't happen. You know, the plan to go to the Department of Environment didn't happen because of his intelligence.
I mean, I thought that was interesting, actually, because I mean, one of the things she said was one of the things about him that was like, she was quite proud of him for at the time and thought was like kind of good about him was that he was so calm under pressure. Well, the reality was he wasn't taking any risks. So no wonder he was calm.
He was calm, and he was always like this. I mean, I never liked him. I didn't. I mean, he was Grumpy Jim for me, and he always had this cold distance. It was an incredibly cold for me anyway. And he took no risks. I mean, I can't remember on the day itself. I think he hired the van for the sound system, if I remember, which is kind of interesting, because what's also interesting is that there was a mention of the M41 street party, so the infamous street party where the trees are planted hidden under the skirts of these carnivalesque kind of figures, and that's where we make the link with the Liverpool Dockers, which is an interesting story where that, you know, the Liverpool Dockers see this audacious, beautiful action and contact us, and complete class shifts. You know, I mean, Dockers, working class Dockers, working with, you know, ravers, direct action ecologists, and so on. And it was through that beautiful story of the trees that they got involved. And doing that thing, one of the organizers was arrested because he had used his credit card to hire the jackhammers that made the holes in the thing. And then he was arrested for criminal damage, and it was a lot of criminal damage, and it was a big deal. And it's interesting that there was a little campaign to not that he wouldn't get go to trial, and that was suddenly dropped at one point as well. So I think that's also linked to Jim in a way of, you know, I think what we realize is they spend 50% of their time trying to keep their legend, and 50% of the time doing the intelligence stuff.
I mean,
so-called intelligence.
I mean, I would argue that maybe a fair bit of time just enjoying themselves seemed to be a big part of it.
Yeah.
You know, and enjoying the perks of the job. We heard quite a lot about the relationship, which he's downplayed quite significantly. He claimed that it was only a few weeks. Monica's very clear it was at least 6 months. He talks about her having relationships with other men. She's very clear, no, that wasn't the case. She just simply had friends, and that as far as she was concerned, she was in a committed relationship with the man she considered to be her boyfriend. She talked about how like he mocked her and was very cold to her within the relationship in numerous ways. We got she talked about how she was convenient for him, and particularly in terms of that march for social justice, like the afterwards, the fallout after things had gone wrong, that he was able just to leave the area and leave with her, which was the beginning of their relationship. And we really got a sense of the manipulative nature of this particular undercover officer, but like so many of the others. And she talked about how like she felt he had real contempt for her. She talked about his anti-feminism, about how he was mocking around like kind of things that she found difficult in life. And really just how abusive he was in so many different ways. That sort of like the understanding of the relationship and like kind of how these undercover officers used women in this way. It's so similar to so many of the other women who were used.
It's a clear pattern. And to be honest, I didn't like any of the undercover officers. None of them became my friends. I really didn't like them. And the only reason I kind of felt I trusted them was because they were always with very cool women. So it was a perfect way of gaining the trust of others. And it's nothing to do, and there's this whole thing of, they're not going to trust single men being in the group. There were plenty of single men in Reclaim the Streets. So it wasn't about that at all. It was really, clearly to be, to a kind of mask and a way of getting other people to trust them, who already had a kind of vibe that wasn't very trustworthy. There are plenty of single men who had completely trustworthy vibes who were there, and none of this lot did. I mean.
We heard reference to Ruth, who won't be giving evidence to the inquiry, but who was another woman who was deceived into an intimate relationship by Jim Boyling, who said that it was his relationship with her gave him a proximity. That she was very well connected. She was very much in the center of organizing things. He wasn't, but because he was in a relationship with her, he had that proximity, which allowed him to, as we've seen with so many of the undercover officers, so many of their reports are based on secondhand knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally what was happening. And it was, it was beautiful to see Monica getting angry, and I think it was great, actually, because
it was incredibly powerful.
More anger. There should be fucking more anger about this. I mean, she was amazing. I mean, it's so powerful.
It was incredibly powerful testimony. I mean, particularly that thing where she talked about the it was in the aftermath of the bit we talked about at the very beginning, the March for Social Justice, and she talked about how the way in which that the triumph of neoliberalism, how like alternatives have been shut down ever since, and that they've limited the options for what is possible in terms of presenting an alternative, and that came across really strongly, and I think it kind of really resonates with this idea that lots of us who've been following the undercover policing inquiry and everything else to do with it for a long time have been talking about, of the idea of a stolen future, but by the way in which the infrastructure of repression that is typified by the SDS and spy cops, but also other elements of the state, have robbed whole generations of people from experiencing the future that we could have had.
I mean, I wrote about that in my statement. I was like, let's imagine a world where they weren't there. Where would we be? If these, they hadn't infiltrated hundreds of groups and destroyed people's lives. I mean, thousands of groups, destroyed people's lives, and basically criminalized us and demonized us. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Monica was brilliant here when it says, Reclaim the Streets, think the car is evil, and also think, big business and the establishment are evil, and Monica goes, well, they're just trying to so another way of demonizing us. And the British. I mean, I live in France now, and I've been active in France for the last decade or so. totally different policing. You know, the British police have read their Foucault. They know that you do it through the mind, you do it through the storytelling, you do it through the press. You don't do it through pure violence in the street. French police, they're gangs. They just, you know, try and kill you, basically, and that's why you don't go out. And the British police are brilliant, and especially with the way they use storytelling and one could do an incredible, you know, media analysis of how they worked with, you know, how the media, you know, Reclaim the Streets went from, you know, being this invisible subculture thing to becoming kind of enemy number one by Mayday 2000, you know, where you have the headlines going, you know, army on standby for Mayday riot the day before Mayday, and you're like, well, isn't the army always on standby? Isn't that the point of an army? But, you know, and that begins with the March for Social Justice, actually. And you really see that, you know, with the attempted murder line and Daily Mail stories of people, you know, that we would hijack. I think the Daily Mail talked about, you know, that Reclaim the Streets will hijack the Liverpool Dockers March. Yeah, we were working with the fucking Liverpool Dockers, you know, and it could have, you know, if working, you know, if an incredible composition of, you know, of worker struggles and ecological struggles had come together in that moment in 97. Yeah, what would, you know, what kind of ecological movement would we have now? We wouldn't have had. Well, yeah, we wouldn't have had the XR disaster. You know, we would have had maybe a true red, green, and black movement that would have, we wouldn't be in the shit where we are now. And yeah, March for Social Justice was a key turning point. It was a key moment. It could have been a key moment. Yeah, and it's tragic. It's tragic, and I just hope that. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah. Yeah, as you say, they stole our future, and
yeah, and I mean, it doesn't just relate to the sort of the nature of like kind of political organizing or like building movements, but also genuinely in the actual like causes of climate change and the world that we all have to live in. And you know that there's so much more when we talk about what the undercover police destroyed. It's individual lives, but it's also everybody's a victim. The society at large is a victim of what they did.
Yeah, and in a way, it'd be great if that would come through more. Oh, there's the jackhammers, or some really hardcore noise techno going on.
Yeah. Apologies for the technical problems in the background.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's going to come through. You know, that political policing. I'm worried. You know, especially in a kind of existential individualism or capitalism, that we're gonna, you know, the whole all the stuff that's going to come out of the inquiry is going to be about, you know, the individual lives, and it is the individual lives, but it's also, you know, they destroyed movements and they destroyed a potential to, you know, to really transform society in a positive way, and of course that's the role of the state. You know, I mean, that's what the state does. That's their job. So of course they're not going to, you know, go, oops, our political police operations were political. But,
sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to come in terms of the questioning of Monica. We'll be back for this afternoon session. Though the relationship with Jim Boyling was only 6 months, her involvement with Reclaim the Streets was much more. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from Roger Geffen and GRD, who were also involved with Reclaim the Streets. Rosa, who was meant to be giving evidence on Thursday, who was deceived into a much longer term sexual relationship, intimate relationship with Jim Boyling, which resulted in her having 2 children by him, won't be giving evidence now. So there is no hearing on Thursday. We hope that Rosa will be back at a later date to give evidence. I don't know if that's going to be the case. It's unclear whether the chair will allow that to happen. In the past, he has dropped witnesses that haven't gone ahead at the timetable of his choosing. In other cases, people have been moved around. We wait and see. Is there anything else you'd like to add about what we've heard so far today?
I mean, you know, no, I think it's, you know, there's always this, you know, you see, you know, you see us through the police eyes, which is always interesting, you know. So you see the references to the squatted squats. You see the references, you know, you see this idea of sex, drugs, and crime, you know, and you know, here we are in the fucking middle of the financial district, you know, sex, drugs, and crime. They know about sex, drugs, and crime. No, it's not just it's not just this kind of demonizing view of the activist movement, and this kind of assumption that some of the activists are all, you know, polyamorous and having sex with each other, and that kind of came through a bit this as well, and it's all you know.
It's a very insensitive line of questioning, right?
Yeah, I was a bit like, why do we need to know this? And it's not really important.
I mean, I guess the point of it, and I agree, it's gross and insensitive, and I really wish they wouldn't. But I think the reasoning for it, I mean, not to defend it, but the reasoning, the theory behind it is that they are speaking to points that have been made by Jim Boyling in his written statement, there dismisses his appalling behavior as being, well, that's there were different rules in these environments, and I was just simply fitting in.
I mean, it's going to be very strange to see him next week.
Yeah, well, he will be here next week. We will have 4 days. There's 4 days of questioning booked in. Whether it will go the full 4 days is unclear. I would really recommend people to come along, but aim to come for the first 3 days. I would suggest, because it's unclear if it'll go to the full 4. But there will be. He will be on the stand. We will be able to see him. He will be asked these questions that arising from today. As is always the case, whenever we have an undercover officer giving evidence, I always think to myself, gosh, this is the worst one. And yet again, I'm sure they just keep getting worse. We felt we got to the apex with Mark Jenner before Christmas. I think there's a lot to suggest that there is something particularly misogynistic and particularly gross about the way in which Jim Boyling operated and the way in which he used women. Which, if
you met him, doesn't come as a surprise.
Fair play. All right, thanks for joining us. I'll be back again this afternoon. We'll do another video during the break and one at the end of the day. It's going to be a full day today. Yesterday was a bit shorter, but thanks for joining us, and see you all in a bit.
Thanks, Tom.